Got it. Then I just had to remember to, there we go. We are now streaming. What is going on, everybody? We are back for the third week in a row. We're doing good. We're being consistent. Look at us, Chase.
Oh, man.
We have awesome topics. It's funny because Chase and I really nerd out over this stuff. And hopefully with how intense we are about it, hopefully we can bring something of value to all of you watching. And that's the whole point of these insurance lives, to take complicated insurance things that nobody wants to think about or deal with and break it down as simple as possible so that everybody can understand, and then hopefully take the practical advice and apply it in your own life. So today we have a good one. It's kind of an intense one, but it's actually a very important one and something that Chase and I feel very, very strongly about. We are going to talk about liability limits, why they're important, and why you want to make sure you have enough personal liability limits on both your auto insurance and your home insurance. So I have one more thing to say, but I just forgot. Chase, I didn't even tell you hi. How are you?
I didn't want to interrupt you, man. You were on a roll, so no problem. What's going on, guys?
Hey. I just noticed Rasmussen Laundry, best Yetis.
Yeah, there we go. So if you want one,
the ice cold all day.
Send me a message and I'll send you one. So hey, and I got a report that Arsenal, they won again. They won again.
Did they win?
They won.
Good start to the season.
Good start. I don't feel so great about ASU football this year, man, but
that's a train.
I don't feel great about ASU athletics as a whole.
Me neither. This will be good. We'll have to talk about ASU for like 2 minutes once the season starts on all these calls. We'll talk about ASU.
Yeah, we'll end each discussion with ASU talk. So if you guys are ASU fans, you can hear me and Michael whine about the basketball games or how bad the football games are.
Love it. And hey, we do these on Thursdays, and most of the time the games are on Thursday nights, so it can kind of be like
that's true. It'll be the preview.
Exactly. Awesome. So yeah, we're going to talk about liability limits, why they're important, and something that I don't want to say bugs me, but I think it does bug me. When I talk with clients, when I talk with prospective clients, and we talk about car insurance coverage, every single person knows what their deductible is. That to them is like the most important thing. They're like, yes, I know I have a $500 deductible. I have full coverage. I have awesome coverage. And it's like, well, let's talk about your liability limits. What are they? Because with your deductible, we're talking about the difference of like $500. You either have a $500 deductible or a $1,000 deductible. At the end of the day, $500 isn't going to make you go bankrupt. With liability limits, we're talking about the difference of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, if we go into umbrella talk. And that does have the capability of bankrupting you and ruining your future. So that's why we feel so strongly about it. So as you all probably know by now, Chase is a personal injury attorney. I'm the bad guy trying to sell you a policy and trying to tell you why you need to pay more money. But Chase has practical advice. He has seen it in his practice. He has seen it either really help and bless people by having the correct coverage, or really devastating people by not having the correct coverage. So,
which is why I like our discussions, because again, the cynic will say, well, Michael just wants to, get a higher premium, stuff like that. But no, I'm going to give some examples today of why it's important to have good liability coverage. And the story in particular that I will share today is so sad and is just a devastating situation. I called and talked with the mom, explained to her what we were going to be doing, and she was very happy to have me share her son's story, just because she wants. I told her that what this was an educational video. We were going to talk to people about making sure they have coverage, and she said, yes, please do this. This is for her son, and she was grateful that people are out there trying to help others avoid the situation that she's in.
Awesome. Love it. So let's jump right into it. Chase, first kind of just give us a breakdown of why liability limits are important, and then we can go into your examples and stories and learn from firsthand experience.
So again, liability coverage is the coverage you have if you injure somebody, whether that be in an automobile accident, or if it's something that has to do with homeowners coverage. It's on your premises, or you do something outside of your home that would fall under your homeowner's policy. That's what the liability coverage would take care of. It's not property damage. It's not, the car or the house damage or anything like that. This is the person's injury we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine the limits now for the minimum were raised recently to $25,000. I think it was July 2020 that they released, or they upped those minimum limits, which were at 15,000 and had been at 15,000 since like 1974, something like that. It had been that low forever. And for anybody who's been to the hospital, you'll know that $25,000 does not go very far. And so when you're talking about if someone goes to the hospital and all you have to cover is $25,000, it could be a problem, because a lot of times when we're talking about liability coverage, which people don't understand, is you're the one that injures the person if you cause the accident. Your insurance is there to help protect you. They're not there to take care of everything. And so if you injure somebody due to your negligence and somebody is injured beyond what coverage you have, the other party is entitled to go after you personally. At the end, if somebody is to settle a case, if I have a case against somebody and their limits for liability coverage are $25,000, but my client's claim is worth more than $25,000, the insurance company won't pay me that money until I sign or my client signs a release saying, hey, we'll accept those $25,000, but we're not going to pursue the person individually, personally contribute to it. And so the insurance company is looking out for you and is trying to avoid you paying out of your pocket. But ultimately, if the injured party says, no, I'm not happy with that, I want this person to contribute, they are entitled to bring suit against you or to demand that you contribute. And they're entitled to find out about your income, where you work, if you own houses, if you have retirements, properties you have. It's not like you can hide anything. A good attorney will be able to vet that and investigate and find every kind of asset that you have that would contribute to it. And I don't want to paint the picture and have this be a doomsday situation where saying that this happens all the time. No, I very rarely come across these situations where somebody has been significantly hurt and a whole lot bigger than what the coverage is. But it's all about the risk and what may happen, and which is why if you've got any kind of assets that you want to protect, it's just good to make sure that you've got enough coverage so that if you were to injure somebody, they're not going to try and go after you. So if you own your own business, if you own a home or multiple homes, any type of property like that, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough coverage to take care of somebody that you injure. Otherwise, you could be forced to take out mortgages, liquidate, do things like that to contribute to what the person has been through.
Yep. And I want to go back and touch briefly on what you said. We're not doing this to be doomsday and to scare people, because it doesn't happen often where somebody gets sued personally from a car insurance accident or things to that nature. But I can say I have had clients who have had the minimum limits, who had a really bad accident, and they get that letter from the insurance company saying, hey, by the way, they're suing you for this much. Your coverage only offers this much. You may want to contact an attorney. And immediately when they get that letter, they're freaking out. They're calling me. They're scared. They're like, hey, I just got a $50,000 payday. Should I go and hide it? Should I hide the cash under my bed? Because they're scared about getting sued personally. And so even though it's something that doesn't happen extremely often, it does happen. And just by getting the right liability limits, you can at least have that peace of mind to where if that does happen, you're not going to have to scramble and try to hide money under your mattress so that you don't get sued personally.
And so, and like you described, the insurance company, whoever you have as your insurance company, owes a duty to their insured, to their client, to try and settle a case within the policy limits. Some other day, we'll nerd out about what is called a bad faith claim, where if the insurance company has an opportunity to sell for the policy limits, but doesn't, and then you get sued and are potentially personally exposed, that can be a situation of bad faith. But that's a whole nother video, a whole nother can of worms. What we're focusing on here is, again, your insurance company is going to try and do right by you. They're going to try and convince the attorney or the injured party, if they're not represented, that, hey, this is the most limits that we have. And they will try to make sure that the case gets resolved within those limits so that you're not contributing. But again, you're leaving it up to the person. So if you've got a person who is either significantly injured or is just stubborn, your insurance company can't force them to accept it. And so then that's going to leave you open to personal exposure. Again, what everybody who has a contract with insurance will be covered if they get sued. Within your policy, it's built in that if you get sued, you're going to have an attorney. They will pay for an attorney to represent you.
Got it.
But again, it's going to get to a point where if the attorney representing you is doing all that they can and you're not cooperating with them, it may leave you on the hook to end up having to hire your own attorney. And so you don't have to necessarily worry too much about, oh, no, I got to pay an attorney now. No, 99% of the time, your insurance company is going to hire and pay an attorney for you. But again, that still leaves you exposed to what you may end up paying based off of what the legitimate claim is that the person is presenting.
Yep, got it. All right, so let's give, the whole purpose of this is to give real world examples so that people can internalize it and understand. So let's jump into some of your stories.
Oh man. So again, I share this with this case breaks my heart. And this is one that we did just as a service to this family. It was horrible. Again, I don't share this for the gratuitous nature of the injuries or for what happened. I share it because it is such a real situation that I'm a visual learner. I don't know about you, Michael, but when I see something like this, that's what really drives home what's being explained to me. And so when you see an example, then it's like, okay, that makes sense. I totally get that. So all of you that may watch this video, put yourself in the shoes of the defendant. We have a person driving a Chevy Tahoe that he's driving and pulls into a gas station and does not see two cousins that are walking on the sidewalk and hits both cousins. Hits one and one of them falls off to the side, but the other ends up staying on and then actually gets pushed up against the gas station building itself and then ends up coming to the ground. Both of these boys were 21 years old and 19 years old. The 21-year-old suffered fractures to both of his femurs and other, rib fractures and such, and lived. He was horribly injured, but thankfully he's got a limp in his walk, but overall is okay. His cousin, the 19-year-old, will never be the same. I share with you again, with permission from the mother, because the mother is now his guardian, a picture of my client. The mom gave me permission to share the story and the pictures, but I still just redact it just for sensitivity purposes. I want to be sensitive to the nature of this, but this gentleman here was 19 years old when the accident happened. Okay. Young, ready for the rest of his life to happen. And he and his cousin are walking home from going to the gas station to get a drink. They got some sodas and are heading back to their house when they get hit. As a result, he suffered such a massive brain injury that he coded multiple times, where he died, but they were able to bring him back. But his brain was swelling such that it was creating so much pressure on his head that they ultimately removed about half of his scalp, or not his scalp, his skull.
Wow.
To create room for the pressure to be able to come down. And he lived and is still alive today, but this is him before the accident. And the first time that I saw him wasn't until he had been moved to a rehab facility. I never got to see him in the hospital. I dealt with his family, his parents, while he was in the hospital, and he was in such delicate care and in the ICU that I never went to go see him. So when I went to go see him for the first time at the rehab center and to talk to his mom about what was going on, it took me by complete surprise what his current condition was. And honestly, it made me cry right there with his mom. But shortly thereafter, when I walked in, seeing him with half of his skull missing, and he doesn't breathe on his own, he can't talk, he can't do anything. He's 19 years old. This accident happened in 2016, I believe. So we're 6 years removed from that. He's I talked to the mom today again to get permission, and I asked him how he's doing, and he's in the same condition as he was when I took this picture.
Wow.
So why do we bring that up? Well, ultimately, the gentleman had minimum policy insurance, 15,000 at the time.
The person that hit him.
Yeah, the person that hit our client had minimum policy. Well, he had a minimum policy if he had policy. He had a policy at the time, but it had lapsed, and so he actually had no insurance.
Wow.
Which was, again, devastating, which is a plug again for having uninsured and underinsured coverage. Even if you're walking and you get an accident, that will still apply. But in this situation, he had no insurance. And so we ended up pursuing him individually. We filed suit, and it got all the way to a hearing where he presented himself, and the judge entered in an award for us for both individuals, the two cousins. And this is public record, but I still redact the information just to be sensitive. But ultimately, the 19-year-old was awarded $10 million. And the other cousin, the 21-year-old, was awarded $593,782. And so now, recorded with the county is a lien against this gentleman of $10,593,000. There are some exceptions, homestead exemptions, to where you can't force someone to go homeless, take them out of their home to pay a judgment like this. But if there's any other kind of assets that he has, at some point, anything he gets is going to end up going to my clients for what has happened to him. And so if you can imagine $10 million, that's going to affect that individual's life forever. And you may say, well, my client is affected forever in the situation that he's in. Yes, he is. But if you can get proper coverage, accidents happen. This guy did not mean to hit these two boys. This wasn't a purposeful thing. He just didn't look and see them.
Yep.
But if you have decent coverage, then that's what you can help a family deal with what's going on, and to pay for what he has been through, and to pay for what he's going to need for the rest of his life.
Exactly.
And so it's
that's the sad thing is, this guy, he really, it was just an accident. He didn't purposely hit them. It was just an accident. So now, instead of one person's life being affected forever, your client, now his life is messed up forever as well, because he didn't have the proper coverage. And so if he would have just had the proper coverage, his coverage could have paid out to help this individual that he probably feels really bad for. And then he wouldn't have to worry about this $10,000 judgment against him for the rest of his life.
$10 million.
Sorry, 10 million, much bigger than 10,000. So
Yeah,
it's sad that because he didn't have the proper coverage, now there's two victims instead of just one.
Exactly. And again, because he didn't mean it, there were no criminal charges against him. It was strictly an accident. But like you're saying, this is something that he's going to have to deal with. He's already going to have to deal with the remorse of putting somebody in that kind of position. But now when you have the judicial consequence of a judgment against him, that if he were to come into any money through work, through the lottery, through inheritance, anything like that, there is a judgment recorded with the county that if he were to refinance homes or do certain things, that they're going to check that and see and say, well, I can't give you any of this money until we satisfy this judgment. And additionally, when there's a judgment entered against an individual like that, it suspends their driver's license. And so now this gentleman is now driving around with a suspended driver's license.
Wow.
And so that's another consequence, that there are plenty of people who drive around on suspended licenses or no license at all. So yeah, you can still get around, but if he were to get pulled over, he's going to get a ticket for that. And eventually it could turn into a criminal situation if he continues to get cited for driving on a suspended license.
Wow. So let me ask you this. Let's say that the defendant, the guy that hit them, he had coverage. Let's say he had 250,000, which is, one of the higher limits. And let's say he even had $1 million umbrella. Do you think it would have gone to that, to where he would have been sued personally and this $10 million judgment would have went against him? Or do you think the insurance company would have paid out, everything would have been fine, they got what they got?
Your question is specific to each client and probably to each attorney, but I'll speak for myself that if there were $250,000 in coverage, again, the insurance company is not going to turn over that money unless you sign something that says you will not pursue a $10 million judgment against our client in return for this $250,000.
Got it.
And it's a lot harder for me to tell a family, hey, you should not accept that money. Yes, it's pennies, compared to what you're dealing with and what his claim is worth, but it's something. It's something there, and it's going to be really hard to say no to that. And then because we won't get a dime of it, it's not like the insurance company would pay us the $250,000 and then we can go ahead and continue against the individual. No, it's either you accept that $250,000 and things are done, or you don't. And when you file suit, when you go through that process that I did, that costs money. Filing suit costs money. Taking depositions costs money. If you have to try the case, this was a default hearing, so it was a little bit different. If you have to try a case and bring experts and stuff, that costs thousands of dollars to ultimately get a judgment that you may never collect on. And so when you have significant limits, there is a real discussion to be had. $250,000 for the family to be able to take care of him and to deal with the consequences of this accident is a real amount of money to consider. And in all likelihood, I have never had an accident to this nature where there were significant injuries and where the case was worth a lot. And if there was a larger amount like 250,000 or 500,000, where my clients ultimately had decided to not take it and to pursue the case against the individual. We've been able to resolve it with that offer, and again, signing a release saying we're not going to pursue the individual, and then boom, right there, you are protected because there's a release saying we can't pursue the defendant individually. You're taken care of, and by having decent limits, you're avoiding the consequences that happened to the guy in the example that I gave.
Got it. So of course it is case and attorney and state specific, but chances are, as long as you try your best to get the best possible coverage you can, you're protecting yourself a lot better than just getting state minimum or not covering yourself at all.
Exactly. You'll never regret having too much coverage in the situation where you need it. Yeah, the premiums are going to be higher, of course, but when this situation comes up, you'll be thanking Michael that he told you to put that amount of coverage on.
Got it. Awesome. So let's do one more story. You have another story you want to tell us?
Oh yeah. So about homeowners coverage. So before law school and before practicing law, it didn't dawn on me that homeowners liability coverage would cover you if you did something outside of your house.
Yeah.
I had just kind of understood it as if something were to happen inside my house, someone was there and something fell and it hurt them. Okay, well then, yeah, that's what that insurance is there to pay for. But it goes well outside of that. And the two examples that I have more than anything is dog bites and then activities outside of the house. I've had multiple dog bite cases where the dog, it's usually a larger dog, will one that comes to mind in particular, grabs the forearm, penetrates through the tendons, and then creates permanent nerve damage to where somebody loses the use of their hand. And so if that person, I think, we've got friends that are dentists, if that were them and all of a sudden they lost the use of their hand, right, you better hope you've got some decent coverage. Again, these are horrific worst case scenario situations, but they do happen and we see them. And I've had it to where people had dog bites like that and had that permanent damage, but thankfully the homeowners where it happened had sufficient coverage, and so there wasn't an issue. The other issue that I recently had was a client who was snowboarding at Snowbowl is the one in Flagstaff. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
So snowboarding at Snowbowl and was going with her son and had fallen over and was kind of off to the left of the slope where they were going and were working on getting up. But a skier that was behind was going really fast and caught an edge, fell down, and then slid into the back of my client. He was wearing a GoPro, so we actually have video of the collision happening, and it was horrific. Just plastered right into her, ended up fracturing her tailbone, and was just in a world of hurt. She was bedridden for a month. It was awful. Homeowners coverage covered that. This guy had homeowners coverage and thankfully had sufficient limits in the situation. that they were able to compensate my client. We were able to resolve the case, and he didn't have to contribute anything personally. Again, that's why we pay for insurance, right? Is the guy didn't mean to hit my client on the slopes. It just happened. He caught edge, he fell, but ultimately that's negligence. He wasn't being careful. And so that's what we pay for insurance. And so him paying a little bit more to have a little bit more coverage took care of my client. It was his way to say, I'm sorry, but then it didn't expose him personally. The cynics out there with personal injuries and stuff will say it's milking the system or something. No, that's why we buy this. This is to pay people if we hurt them. And this is all part of under the law. And there's no way that we can go back and say, oh, we're going to take this away from you. You can't change the past. Right. And so thankfully, our country has a system that says the way I'm going to say sorry is I'm going to pay for your medical bills and for having to go through this. And so if you have the right amount of coverage, then these situations, you'll be fine. You won't be paying any of it out of your own pocket. And in those situations too, your deductible, like Michael referenced, that has to do with collision, that has to do with property. There's no deductible for liability. There's no deductible for injuring somebody. And so your insurance company is going to pay that 100%. Nothing's going to come out of your pocket. Your premiums are going to likely go up because they go up when you have an at-fault situation. But again, if it happens, you're going to be grateful that you've got it and that the person is taken care of. And so that you can feel relieved that the person is taken care of and that there's no money coming out of your pocket as a result.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought in a home insurance example, because I talked in the beginning how no one really focuses on liability limits on your car insurance. Same thing with homeowners insurance. They know, again, their deductible, and they know their house is insured for $400,000. But you can have liability limits on your home of $500,000. Sometimes even carriers offer $1 million liability. And that's really where you expose yourself in situations like you explained. If you cause horrific damage or medical injuries to somebody, at that point, you're like, I don't care about my house burning down. I care about I'm getting sued for $2 million. And that's where your liability coverage comes into play.
And in Arizona, for anybody who owns a dog, you need to make sure that you have good liability coverage, because in Arizona, dog bites are strict liability, meaning it doesn't matter if that is the only time your dog has bitten somebody. You are strictly liable. You are liable for the injuries that caused. The only defense to that type of claim is if the injured party provoked the dog. If you said, hey, don't touch my dog, he's just not right, and then he still went over there and started petting it and then it bit him. Or if the dog is in its crate and he sticks his head in and is doing something to it and then gets bit. But if it's just the dog is wandering around the house and the person is interacting with it and then it bites them, there's no defense. There's nothing that you can say, oh, well, my dog had never done that before. Doesn't matter. And so you're going to be liable for that. And so that's where homeowners coverage is going to take care of you. So again, you're not paying out of pocket. And then again, those examples of being out of the house, that's just what boggled my mind. And, oh yeah, we can take care of people if I've done something wrong with my homeowners coverage while I'm out snowboarding. Yes. And so you'll be glad you have it in that instance that something does happen.
Yep. And I'll go, you talked about dog bites. Make sure, and this is just not Arizona, we write business in a number of different states. Make sure as well that your insurance company knows that you have a dog, because there are some insurance companies that will not insure you if you have a pit bull, Rottweiler, things to that nature. There is a company out there for everybody. So if one company denies you for your pit bull, you can go find another company. And we have a lot of options for you at Heritage, but make sure that your insurance company knows, because if they don't know and you have a restricted breed, then they're going to deny the claim as well because you did not disclose that information.
Exactly. Like last week's example where we were showing and analyzing the policy terms, the actual contract. If you're curious, read your contract, get your homeowner's coverage information and see what is, it'll have a provision about dogs. It'll have a provision about anything, and see if it says, if there are specific breeds that are excluded. Because I have seen that, or I have seen policies where it flat out says, we do not cover dog bites. We do not do this. And so you'll want to make sure, though, in those situations, usually the agent is asking, do you have pets that live in the house? And if not, then that's why they put the exclusion in there. But that's another reason why you want to have a good agent, is to make sure that when you purchase the policy, are you covered? Because what if you are someone who owns a dog or an animal and you just assumed that the coverage was there, but in reality, it wasn't. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
before you go through and read the 40 pages of that, just let me and Michael tell you what to do. We'll read it and nerd out for you.
There you go. And that's a good place to end, and always a good reminder. Every state, every policy, every company is different. So a lot of times Chase and I will throw out these terms, but you still need to either one, read the 40-page policy yourself, or find a good attorney, good insurance agent that can help you make sure you're covered. Don't just assume and say, oh, I have 500,000 in liability, I'm covered for everything. That's not the case. Make sure you know what your specific policy says and covers.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chase. Thank you all
Yeah.
for watching. And just remember, forget about where your deductible is. That doesn't matter. Think about liability. That's one of, if not the most important coverage on your home and auto and any insurance policy that you have. So, all right, Chase, thanks for joining us. Arsenal,
Yeah.
they have a game this week?
Of course. Got another one this
Yeah.
Saturday.
Okay.
I'll be here at the office Saturday working and watching. Y'all can join me.
There you go.